Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday market snapshot for the Ottawa real estate market for Monday, June 3rd, 2024. My name is Annalee Rice. I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario, and every week I bring you the details of what is going on in the Ottawa real estate market. As this is the first week for the first report in June, I'll include lots of charts and details of what happened throughout May. So it's a little bit of a sneak peek until the results come out from the board or the Canadian Real Estate Association. Okay, let's go. Okay, so first off, let's look at the stats citywide. We can see that the active inventory did climb again this week, but not as much. It was only up by 24. So we're a little almost at 2,700 active listings across the city. The detached market only climbed by 1. The townhomes were actually down a little bit, but the climb was mostly in the condo market inventory. For sales, we actually did jump up by 63 this week. Wasn't unexpected from what I had been seeing in the numbers before, but it was mostly in the condos and the townhomes that the increase was. It was a little bit more for the detached as well, but mostly condos. Okay, so this chart is the graphic form of the inventory. So it's the overall inventory in black, the active inventory in green, which looks like it's peaking out, and also has the conditional sales in orange and the firm sales this week in red. You can see that I've got the little dash lines there to kind of compare it to the same week last year. Obviously, our inventory is much, much higher than where it was. We were just on the climb of inventory at the beginning of the climb of the inventory last year. Sales peaked earlier last year. You can see them peaking in early May. And this week actually was one of our highest weeks for sales this year. May was a little bit slower than what we had last year. Okay, so these next 3 charts are the inventory levels for the last 10 years. I just wanted to show, like, not only are we very high inventory compared to the last, in this case, this is the detached inventory. We have higher inventory right now than we've had for May since 2018. But what I did want to point out here is you can see that through like 2014 through 2019, May was kind of the peak time for the inventory, very close to the peak, if not the peak. And it looks like this year we're back to that, I'm going to call it normal, where the inventory peaks in May and then drops off through the summer and the fall. The last 4 or 5 years have been the abnormal years, not only with the really low inventory, but also, the last couple of years, our peaks have been very late with the various things that have been going on with the market. Okay, so here's the townhomes, and in this case, you can see our inventory just about that 450 level is actually higher than what we've had all the way through till 2016 was the last time we had inventory that high in May. Obviously, last October, it looks like we had inventory that was higher than the current level, but it was since like the May inventory, it's been since 2016 since it was higher than that. And here's the condos. You can see again, the last time we had inventory levels this high at all was back in 2018. And again, you can see that the peak inventories tend to be in and around the May timeframe, and it's just been the last, 2020 all the way through to 2023 where the peaks have been later in the year. Okay, so this is our graphic on the new listings for the week. We had 523 new listings this week. 134 of those were relisted properties and 389 were new to the market properties. The ratios for that are 26% relisted and 74% new to the market listings. And that's the second week in a row where we've been kind of at that 3/4 new listings and 1/4 being relisted. Before that, we were down around the 20% relisted properties. So you can see not only in the number of properties being relisted, but the percentages are a little bit higher now. And I think that's just, as sales are not super high and they're not catching up, the inventory is such high levels, then the option is to relist, to try and refresh it and see if you can get new interest in your property that's listed. Okay, let's look at the sales next. We had 311 sales this week, and we had 18% of those sales were with no conditions. So we've been sort of sitting just below that 20% for the most part over the last couple months. Although this week it was down by 2%. And we had 31% of the sales this week were properties that were at or above asking price. So just below 2/3 or just below 1/3. Next up, we look at the sales that happened within 7 days. We had 45 properties that sold within the first 7 days on the market, and that was 14% of the sales. And that was a bit of a drop. We've been generally up around the 17, 18, 20% of the sales. So a little bit lower, might be just a blip. But of those 45 properties that sold within the 7 days, 64% sold with no conditions, and that was up by 11%. That's a pretty big jump. And then also 69% sold at or above the asking price. Then we look at the number of properties that sold within 30 days of being on the market was 212. That was 68% of the sales were properties that had been on for 30 days or less. And of those, 19% sold without any conditions, and 37% of those sold at or above asking price. Okay, so when we look at a little bit more detail of the at or above asking price, what does that mean? We had 96 homes that had sold at or above asking price this week. 50 of those, which was 52%, sold at asking or up to 1% over asking price, so just minimally above or just at asking price. 33 of those properties, which was 34%, sold between 1 and 5% above asking price, and 13 homes sold for more than 5% of the asking price, and that was 14% of those at or above asking, which was a bit up from last week. So for the ones that had the most over, it was it was just one single home that sort of filled both of those. It was 30% over asking price, and that represented 136,800 over asking price. In that case, it was a home that was listed. It was a detached 3-bed, 1-bath home in around Woodruff that was listed at 450,000 and sold for 586,800. It was a total fixer-upper. Like, looked from the pictures like it had very, very strong smoke discoloration on the walls, lots of work needed to be done, oil tank, stuff like that. So total fixer-upper, but detached home and in a pretty decent area. And so that's a pretty high price, I think, for a total like a absolute fixer-upper. But obviously 450 was very underpriced, and that's why it ended up selling so far over. Okay, let's zoom in and see the different areas, and then we'll get to the month-end charts. So first off, Central Urban Region, we had drop in the detached active listings, steady for towns, and quite a jump for the condos on the market. Sales were up across property types, but most notably in the condo market and towns. In Canada and Stittsville, we had an increase for the detached and slightly up for the condos, and a fairly significant drop in the number of active listings for townhomes in Canada and Stittsville. Sales were up just slightly for detached, up a little bit for towns, and steady for condos. In Barrhaven and Riverside South, steady for the detached active listings and up for towns and condos. And I was pretty shocked at seeing 62 condos on the market in Barrhaven, Riverside South. That's not, like, they typically don't have that many. Sales were up just slightly across property types for Barrhaven and Riverside South this week. And in Orleans, we had pretty steady, so detached up just slightly, townhomes and condos just down slightly. And again, there's a lot of condos for sale in Orleans. Sales were down for the detached and towns as well, and just up 1 for condos this week. Okay, so this is a chart form for all the data that I just went through with the different regions of the city. You can see that this is for the detached, and you can see that the number of conditionally sold properties is a little bit higher than the sold. So expect the sold properties for detached homes next week will be fairly steady from what they are this week, I would say, or potentially a little bit higher. For the townhomes, again, we've got about steady number of conditionally sold and sold. And then for the condos, it's a little bit lower. And so I would expect that the number of sales of condos next week will be lower. I think maybe this week was just a bit of a blip. Such a high jump this week, it'll probably drop back down next week. Okay, so this is the month-to-month average sale price for the different types of properties, and I do separate out semi-detached here, and I do separate out the condo row homes and the condo apartments just because they sometimes have different prices. I think the big thing here is that we see that I think that the higher levels of inventory are finally starting to catch up on the prices. Higher inventory means less competition, or more competition for selling, less competition for buying, and that should make the sale prices trend down. And I think at least for the freehold properties, we see that this month. So we see a little bit of a drop for the detached, so 2.3% down. And then semi-detached, I've said this every month, but like there's a lot more volatility depending on what properties are selling there. So it looks like a huge drop, but we'll look on the next page. You can see how it actually looks when you look visually. And townhomes were actually fairly steady, so just down 0.6, just down $4,000 on average. Condo row homes actually saw quite a jump, so 3.4%, and condo apartments, it looks absurd, 9.4% increase for the average sale price. However, there were a couple of really luxury, like 2 million plus condos that sold this month, so I think that got seriously skewed by that. Okay, so this is the detached, and you can see the black lines are the 2024. You can see that the average sale price did drop just slightly from the April mark, and it's down slightly year on year also. For the semi-detached, again, there's a lot more volatility here. You can see April was the peak price there for like a very high price, and like the last 3 years has all been a very high price there. And year over year, the semi-detached price is actually slightly up, but month over month, obviously, the big drop there. For townhomes, you can see it's been very steady the last 3 months. And actually, if you chop off the 2022 prices there, it's been pretty steady the last 3-4 years there. Now this one here is condos as a whole. So this is combining all the different condo sales. And you can see that that very high average sale price obviously brought it up almost to the 2022 prices. I do expect that that will just drop back down next month. It was due to some very high priced condos that sold. Okay, so these are the close price to the original list price ratio. It sort of gives you an idea of how close to the asking price that homes are selling. And it's also a good measure as to whether or not the homes are being listed at the price that they expect to sell at, or are they like under listing, or are they over listing. I think it shows us that most homes are still listing kind of where they want to sell or at a reasonable price. And the averages are in that 98% range, and they haven't changed significantly. The average days to sell, that's so I've separated that out for detached towns and condos. We can see it's all in the 22 to 28 day range. You can see that it's been very steady for the detached, sitting around 24. Townhomes are slightly less, 22 days average days to sell, and condos surprisingly actually came down a little bit. It was at 28. It tends to sit a little closer to the 30 there. Okay, so here is the chart that shows how many sales happened in the city of Ottawa boundaries this month. And you can see the 2024 line, that's the black line, very consistently this year. We've been slightly above the 2023 mark. And although the sales numbers hadn't been super strong, they had been above 2023 until May. This month we did see, this past month we did see fairly significantly fewer sales than what we saw even in 2023. And you can see, other than 2020, which was lockdown, this is the lowest number of sales that we've seen in May for at least a decade there. I think a lot of it has to do with that inventory. We've just got so much inventory. There's a lot, it just creates an uncertainty, and people are just wondering, all this inventory, is that going to bring prices down? Interest rates are still very high, and it just makes people pause a little bit. And so I think that's why. Will it pick up if the interest rates start dropping? It's possible, but we'll have to see. Okay, so when we combine the inventory levels with the number of sales, that's what we get the months of inventory. So the number of months it would take to sell all of the current inventory if no other properties came on the market, and keep selling at the same rate of which we're at. So inventory levels, we've been talking for weeks and weeks and months about the inventory levels climbing. The sales were also fairly strong, but definitely they dropped off this last month. So we can see in all three different property types that the months of inventory did climb. So we're sitting at 2.6 months for detached, 1.6 months for townhomes, and 2.4 months for condos. And it actually isn't that bad. Like, that's not that many months of inventory. It's just, it is climbing. May is usually like kind of the lowest point. But because of the high inventory, a little bit slower on the sales, they are climbing. Okay, and this last chart is the months of inventory looking back the last 10 years. You can see that over the last 5-6 years, we've always been in a seller's market. Now, that is the whole of the city of Ottawa, the whole market as a whole. There are certain segments of the market that are selling quicker. There are some that sell much slower. So talk to your realtor, find out what the months of inventory is for the specific area, the specific property type that you're looking at. But we can see that it's starting to climb. We're heading back up a little higher than that. As a whole, it's still in the seller's market. But when you compare it to the last few years, 2019 through early 2022, this does seem a lot slower. A lot of people label this as a balanced market, and it feels quite balanced when you compare it to how crazy it was in those years. But we still are in a big deficit of properties just generally. So it is still favors the sellers as a whole. Okay, so that is my update for this week. Was a bit longer than normal. If you have any questions, please drop a comment. Give it a thumbs up if you think it was helpful. And if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope you have a fantastic week, first week of June. Thanks.